Good evening. It is Thursday, November 7th, 2024 at 6 p.m. We are at the District Service Center in Cottage Grove, Minnesota. We would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the land of the Mdewakanton Dakota people. Mdewakanton means dweller of the Spirit Lake. Our first item on the agenda is 1.0 roll call. Dana?
Ryan Clark.
I'm here.
Sharon Van Leer.
Here.
Eric Tessmer.
Here.
Pat Driscoll.
Here.
Melinda Doles.
Here.
Simi Petnaik.
Here.
Katie Schwartz.
Here. 2.0, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, 3.0 is approval of our agenda. Can I get a motion to approve? Moved by Sharon, seconded by Melinda. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. On to 4.0, our workshop items, and we have one this evening, 4.1, and that is a nutrition service update that will be introduced by Abby Baker, Executive Director of Human Resources and Operations.
Good evening. Tonight we are pleased to have Wendy Peterson here. She is joining us as our Director of Nutrition Services. And I know you hear from Wendy and her team in the spring about the budget for the upcoming year, and we wanted to provide an update about numbers for this year. Wendy and her team have had to be so versatile in the last few years coming out of the pandemic, adjusting to free meals, and now they're just rocking it with free meals, and they really have a focus this year on connecting with students again. We're more fully staffed, and we're able to bring the fun back into the cafeterias. So I'll have Wendy talk about all the great things that they're doing.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to come in and talk about all the wonderful things that are going on in nutrition services. So I would first like to start off with just a brief introduction of the team members that work out of the District Service Center. I know if you were here in the spring, you had the pleasure of meeting Bobby Joe and Carrie Botnan. They're the other two administrators that work for the department. But in addition, we have 2 years ago, we added Erica Piletsky as a second dietitian on our team. Bobby Joe is also a dietitian, but with the number of special diets and very complicated student meal patterns that we have to provide for a lot of these kiddos, we did decide to add a second dietitian. So Erica is new to the team, but coming from a different district and doing just a wonderful job. We have Mary Rasmussen. Mary is responsible for a lot of our invoicing and payroll. Jennifer Keeling, who is our tech specialist, and then Colleen Reimer, who is our office coordinator. In addition to these amazing women, we also have about 155 team members that provide over 18,000 meals a day, and so we couldn't do it with all of them, and they're just doing a fantastic job this year. So in moving on, I just wanted to provide a little bit of a timeline for context so that everyone is aware of what we have gone through the past handful of years. So this year with the bill that was passed by Governor Walz, meals are free, just like they were last year. And then the prior year in 2023, this is when we had to charge meals based on eligibility. And so at that time, over 75% of our students were in the paid status, so we were reimbursed on that fact. And then our free and reduced students obviously were covered by either by a combination of the state and federal government. And then the year before that, in the gold, and all of this is going to be color coordinated moving forward, I wanted to make a note of that. But in the gold, meals were free coming out of COVID as well. Those meals were primarily covered by the federal government. So in looking at reimbursement rates, I wanted to put this up as well. And note that the reimbursement rates that we have on this chart are if everyone was at the free status. So even though 2023 is marked as $4.53, if students were charged for their meals, so the parents were paying for those meals, that actual reimbursement came in at about 60 cents lower than that. So it was a combination of the $4.53 and then approximately $3.90 for that year, which was a reduce in revenue of over $1 million compared to what we're being reimbursed at currently. So just for context on that. So when we look at what's going on overall this year, again, just to make note, the blue is the current Last school year is in the green, and then the red was the last time that meals were charged based on eligibility. So you can see a massive uptick in the amount of meals that we're servicing to students when it comes to breakfast. We had budgeted back in the spring for a daily average of about 3,200 breakfasts a day, and our current average is close to 4,000, with many, many days going over 42, 43, 4,400 breakfasts a day. In looking at lunch participation, you can see the same, kind of the same movement that we saw with breakfast. Again, the blue is the current 2 months that we've been in session, and then the red, the last time that meals were paid. So a significant increase in our overall participation when it comes to lunch. Projected 13,200, which was very similar to the average of last year. We had assumed that we had captured the majority of students that we were anticipating seeing at lunch. However, we are busy, but good busy. And so they are pushing anywhere between 13,000 and 800. We had a goal this school year to reach 14,000 lunches one time, and they have hit it 7 times, with today being the 7th day that they reached over that 14,000 mark. About 10 years ago, Bobby and I remember, could we hit 10,000? Would there be a day that we would ever hit 10,000? So to hit 14,000, they're already pushing for that 15,000 mark. So we'll see if that happens. And then looking at our a la carte revenue, this is where we saw some difficulty over the past handful of years. I was trying to look back and see when the last time was that our department was actually staffed. We are guessing that it was maybe 8 years ago. And so last year especially, we were down 25 team members. And so when you have 23 sites that you're operating, average of almost 1 a site. Some of our high schools were down 2 or 3 employees on a daily basis. That was without call-ins. And so often what would happen is in every secondary, we have a location that we offer a la carte sales. And anytime that we were short-staffed, those a la carte rooms would be closed. That was the first thing to happen because we want to ensure that students are getting their meal, and all of the extras are secondary. And so those rooms would be closed, and often were closed for an extended period of time. This year, all of the rooms were open within the first 2 weeks of school, and some of our buildings even opened them on the first day of school. And then just to remind everyone that a la carte doesn't just necessarily mean snacks and drinks. Anything that is outside of the reimbursable meal falls under our a la carte revenue. So if a student decides to have a second entree, that's going to be captured in our a la carte sales. And we are up about $3,000 a day from last year. And so we're just seeing massive amounts of purchases. And I think from what we've been reported from some of the managers is students that never had money to buy a treat, to buy a drink, or buy a second entree, because the meals are free, their parents are still putting money into their account and allowing them to do so. So overall, big increases with our a la carte revenue as a whole as well. And then when it comes to our fund balance, our actual fund balance for last year was over $3.8 million. We had projected a break-even year for the most part this year, but if our revenue and expense reports hold true for the rest of the year of what we're seeing, we'll have to do some serious adjustments to that because we should be able to make some significant improvements in this. However, we are running at the end of last fiscal year at about a 27% fund balance, which is well over the school board goal of 9% for our department. So before I move on, are there any questions about the numbers?
I had one question about the breakfast. Do we know if a majority of the ones that were getting breakfast in that 23 year, were they the ones that got it at the free and reduced, or were we getting
During school year 23?
Yeah.
It was actually a mix. Okay. So I think the way it used to be with breakfast many, many years ago was that the only students that ate breakfast were free and reduced students. And we have seen a dramatic change in that. 2 years ago it was running at about 50% free and reduced and 50% paid students at that time. There was also, coming out of COVID, there was a time to where a lot of our classes, the teachers were bringing the entire classrooms down at the elementary school, and we've really gone away from that, trying to service students that truly need to eat. And so if they do need to eat, if they show up late, we're going to take care of them, but we don't want to have the food waste. So often what was happening is students were showing up to us, they've already eaten breakfast, they might pick one thing and throw the rest in the trash. So we really are trying to do a push towards, let's feed the students who need it. If they're hungry, of course we want to take care of them. And so we're seeing a good mix of not only free and reduced students, but full pay or students that are not on educational benefits as well.
Perfect, thank you.
Wendy, for the increase in breakfast participation this year, do you know what is driving it? Is it like specific, like, is it the high school level, or is there just different?
No, it's actually
communication?
across the board. For instance, Oltman is serving 450 students in the morning. They used to do about 250. So over the past couple of years, they've captured a lot of students. I think it's really parents taking advantage. We all know that the economy is tough. Inflation is hitting everybody's pocketbooks, and so if they can come to school and eat, they really want to take advantage of that. And so we're able to see the benefit from that as well.
Wendy,
I heard.
just want to make sure this works. Can you remind me how the funding works from the state? Do they reimburse us?
Yes, so the majority of the money comes from the state because of the free meals. So we do get a portion of that from federal government. So what they're doing is the federal government gives us a certain amount, and then for any student that was not under educational benefits, the state is covering the rest of that reimbursement. So that captures everyone let me go back real quick. That captures everyone then coming in that we get that $4.64.
Do you have I don't know if you have this number, but do you have I guess maybe you have it for last year, the total cost for the whole district for the meal program?
Cost as far as our expense?
Not to the district, but just the amount of money it costs to fund the meal program for the entire district, like per year.
From the state?
Yeah.
I do have that
spending.
number. Unfortunately, I had 2 packets and I left that one on my desk. So it's in the millions. It's definitely in the millions. Let me look real quick. I can give you a guess so lunch reimbursement for the state, I have that budgeted for this upcoming school year at about $6.3 million
That's
for
for
lunch. For lunch.
Breakfast is half that, maybe?
Probably about a third.
Third?
Yep.
Okay, perfect, thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
For the reimbursement, so how do we ensure, or how are we, I'm assuming that there are still free and reduced kids who are covered by the federal government.
Correct.
And so with this movement, though, I'm also assuming that fewer kids have filled out paperwork or not.
Yes, I mean, it is more difficult because especially when it's educational benefits, a lot of people call it free and reduced applications, but we truly want people looking at it as educational benefits because it goes well beyond just the lunch program. And so there's been a large push by the communications department to ensure that families are still filling out the educational benefits form. Now, younger students, they might be able to reap the benefit of community education programs, but the older the students get, the more benefits they receive from those forms. And so it's been critical for us as a district to really try to get the word out that, hey, each individual building benefits from this, the district benefits from you filling out these forms, and thank you to communications, they've done a great job of ensuring that families still also get the forms in. In conjunction with that, year ago, at the beginning of last year, I do believe it was, the state also made Medicaid an automatic qualifier for benefits, where that wasn't the case prior to that. So there was a large uptick of families that now automatically qualified for benefits where 2 years ago they didn't. And so that's helped and has taken away the burden from some of these families of having to do the paperwork, because we just get a file that we upload, process them, they get a letter from us saying they're approved. And so that has helped also when it comes to our overall numbers and the paperwork aspect.
Can you,
Good.
so can you explain for the people that might not know what the other benefits are that the secondary older students get?
Yeah, there's a variety of benefits. They can get reduced fees on Sean, you probably have a list. They can get reduced fees on athletics, they get discounts on driver's education, they get discounts on internet, things like that, community education programs, kids club. There's a long list of benefits that people can take advantage of if they choose to. I think that's site-based. Chris, do you?
But we do look at that.
Yeah, I think it's more location-based, but there are benefits with that as well. It used to be the protection on devices for computers. I know that we're not doing that anymore this year, but last year that was another thing that was covered under that. They have discounted fees on that as well.
And then with the increase of kids getting meals, are we seeing like the number of kids who are eligible for educational benefits, is that staying basically the same, or?
As far as the overall percentage?
Yeah, overall
Yeah, we're
percentage.
seeing it be very similar. We're still in the, I think it is mid-20s. I haven't pulled that number recently, but we were averaging about 23% for years. I think it's gone up to 27, I think was the last number. Yeah, field trips is one of the things that's listed as well.
One more question, since some of this stuff just made me curious. There is no real incentive, though, for a particular family to fill out the paperwork to receive that federal funding for the district. Every student gets.
Not when it comes to meals. Correct, yes,
So
because automatic qualifier.
So do you have any idea, probably a hard question, but do you have any idea about the numbers previously before the bill or the law was passed, as far as the numbers of students that had submitted that paperwork as opposed to now?
It's really difficult to break that down because of that Medicaid factor, because we qualified roughly 5,000 more students on the automatic qualifier of Medicaid, so that is also skewing the numbers. So there's no real way to break that down because of that coming into play last year. And so those were families that possibly the year before that were filling out the form that now no longer have to. And so when you look at approximately a quarter of our students that are on that, and 5,000, roughly 5,000 of them, we've got 25% of them that are now on Medicaid. Now, the difference between Medicaid is they don't have to accept the benefits, whereas this free meal program, families cannot opt out. The only way for us would be as an district to opt out of the entire National School Breakfast and National School Lunch program, in which we'd lose all of our funding, and there's just no way to be financially solvent that way.
Federal funding.
Lose all federal as well as state funding. Yep, so individual families cannot just say, I don't want to participate, I want to pay on my own. That is not an option with this program. There are a couple, I do believe, school districts that do not participate in the National School and Breakfast program, but that's something, you're talking $12 million in funding between federal and state that you would, out of a $14 million budget, that you would lose funding for, and then the parents would have to absorb that cost.
Okay. You mentioned a little bit about, trying to prompt families to fill out paperwork when applicable. Can you speak a little bit more about the methods that you're using to do that?
Yeah, a lot of it is coming from the district communication team and sending out in the parent newsletter to educate families on how it works. So there's a lot of communication that's coming in that regard. We've tried to do information pushes to direct sites so they can let families know. So if we're seeing that a particular school is having a low participation when it comes to educational benefits, we'll do direct communication to those families of a site as well.
Yeah, and that's through, it's in our enrollment sessions, we have a whole campaign for it that we go, and then we do break it down by schools. So it's kind of a multifaceted approach to get there. So we put it in our newsletters, but then we have templates that our principals use. There's phone calls, we try to put it out there in as many ways as we can.
We also have what's called carryover, so anyone that was receiving benefits, say last school year, those benefits carry over for 30 days, and so we're required to notify those families if they're going to lose eligibility. So we'll send them emails, we send them snail mail, if that's what it's still called, U.S. Postal Service mail, and send that out as well and notify them that way, because we definitely don't want families losing their benefits.
Okay. Is there a way to, I guess, because look, I'd like to save as much money or take it from the feds as we can. So is there a way to track, how we're doing with that from a year-to-year basis? I know that you said that the Medicaid thing kind of complicated matters or made things more difficult to track, but since that's been in play, is there a way to see how we're doing with families filling out that paperwork to maximize that benefit? I get it. As a parent, you fill out endless forms. Nobody wants to do it. And there isn't much of an incentive, frankly.
Well, and there are still qualifiers. So it's not like if you do the paperwork, you automatically qualify, because it is it's income based. Yep. And so, so I think what we have seen is, and again, Medicaid is going to throw that off, but we've seen an uptick, and some of that is due to the changing of the income guidelines. But we have not seen a dramatic decline in that. Mm-hmm. But yes, we can pull historical data for that.
Okay, I'm just curious. Thanks.
Yeah, for sure. Anything else? All right, we'll move on to the other information that we have. So we came up with a department focus for the school year, and we are calling it Food is Fun. To be completely transparent, we're in survival mode for many, many years. And so this year we felt was a great year to try to bring back some fun and excitement into the cafeteria, try to get more participation, make students feel more comfortable. In conjunction with that, it was one of our primary focuses to also incorporate literacy into the cafeteria. And so we are doing a lot of food trivia. At the elementary level, we have this adorable little cow named Maggie, and every Wednesday, Maggie has a joke for the students to come over and read, and it's either a joke or it's informational nutrition education that we tie in with that piece, and we do that all across grade levels as well, so it's grade appropriate literacy information tied to nutrition. We also have brought back our theme days. This is something that we did for years prior to COVID. And since then, it's just been really difficult to alter the menu and to be able to do anything above and beyond for our students. But we had a border battle for the Vikings and Packers game. This is something that the students truly enjoy. We changed the menu. We turned everything on the salad bar purple, green, yellow, or white. Our team gets to dress up. We got them football aprons to wear this year. They also got to dress up for National School Lunch Week, which was our school Pirates theme. And then we have a variety of events scheduled upcoming for the students. So we're tagging into the Veterans Day celebration next week that the individual sites are doing. And we are offering, they're called the Red, White, and Boom Pops for our students. We're calling them our Veterans Day Pops, our Veterans Pops. And just a variety of different things that we're going to do. Another one of our most popular events that we've done is we do a Dead of Winter luau and a citrus celebration where we bring in different citrus items to the salad bar that students may not be accustomed to. So it's a really fun day. We bring in kumquats, and the kids often have never heard the word before. They have no idea how to eat them. Most adults don't know how to eat them. And then we're going to have a large event for Twins home opener, changing the menu, doing some fun baseball themed items as well. So just really trying to get the students excited to be in the cafeteria. And I shared this story at Operations Cabinet, but we do a staff spotlight for all of our employees so that we get to know people from other teams. And one of the managers filled out the spotlight, and she said her most memorable day was just this past border battle day, because at Liberty Ridge, the kids did the Skol chant so many times that she lost her voice. So it was just a really, really fun day for the students. And then our overall district initiative that we're doing this year that we are so excited about is a partnership with Basic Needs Food Market. And so we have started a pilot program at 5 schools, and that is at Eastridge, Oltman, Gray Cloud Hillside, and Crestview. And so the students are learning about how to recycle items that will go then to the food market, which is in Cottage Grove, so that families that are in need can come and pick up those produce or wrapped items. And so because of the number, we often get the question, why aren't we allowing students to then take these items home? We have significant food allergies in our district to where if students came into contact with the wrong item, they could go into anaphylactic shock, which we have had happen. And so our goal is to get the food to the food market and have families come there. They are responsible for washing, ensuring food safety, and as well as educating the families on that. And so we just started this program approximately 3 weeks ago, going very, very well. And I'm happy to announce that they reached out to me a couple days ago, and we're going to be adding Woodbury Middle School to the list. So we're going to be up to 6, and hopefully that will be starting, if not next Monday, the following Monday. And then as Basic Needs has volunteers, they will continue to let us know that their capacity has increased, and then we'll add additional schools to the list. So the students are learning a lot about food insecurity and food waste, and it's just been a really good partnership so far, especially for families that have that food insecurity in the community. You know, and I think I just want to stress that when we are staffed, which I wanted to thank the board for approving the wonderful raise that our team received, because that has allowed us to be staffed this year. We are seeing the happiness and joy coming back to our employees. They're really finding happiness and satisfaction out of their work again, and they're loving being around the students, and they're being able to give the quality customer service. We've always focused on quality food, but I think when we were so short-staffed that the customer service kind of went by the wayside because they were just in this constant moving and trying to get the students taken care of. And so we're really seeing the love and the joy coming back into the cafeteria, and our teams are just happy and enjoying coming to work every day. And so it has been a 180 change from years past, and I think we're in, you know, all of us in nutrition services are very, very happy and excited about what, you know, the school year has to offer for the students. And then in the end, then what we're able to do to our cafeterias, to our kitchens, being able to recycle some of those funds, increase our equipment, our capacity, and just continue to serve.
So with the food rescue program, I know at one point it was where the fruits had to have skins on them, and it's looking like apples on there now. So with the funded lunch program, I know they have to have each item.
Yes,
right,
correct.
for it to be funded. Is the box that you're providing for the rescue program like right as they check out with their pins, so it doesn't go to their tray and get more contaminated, and they can just drop it right away?
Yeah, we actually purchased these large I'll call them more of a cart. And so then the students can put that in at any time. And sometimes they're putting it in right away. Sometimes they're going because they don't know what they're going to eat. And if they wind up getting full from their meal, then they're taking those items back. So it just kind of depends upon the situation with the students. But yes, they're readily available in the cafeteria.
Wendy, this may be a challenging question to answer or to ask because I forgot to send it to you ahead of time. But part of the free and reduced lunch, or the free school meals from the state, do we know, I know that there were some number of families that were kind of on the cusp. They did not make little enough to be eligible for educational benefits, but the amount of school lunch was probably a hit to their pocketbook, and so they were either going into debt to the school district or using the Angel Fund or something like that. Do we know how many of those kids there were or there used to be?
I don't know if there's ever a way to know truly the percentage of students, because the only way for us to know would be if everyone filled out the educational benefit form.
Okay.
We do know that we had to deny families that were $20 over. The threshold is what it is, and if they were any amount over that, we have no leeway to approve them. And so we do know that the year that 2023, when meals were paid, there were, I'm going to say roughly $30,000 that came from the Angel Fund, and then I do believe it was about $20,000 that came from the general fund to cover that debt, because it's Legally, those funds, if the students go negative, they can't come from our budget, they have to come from general fund. So they cover that. And now we no longer have that debt. You don't have students that have to worry about, I mean, we always fed students. And so it was never a matter of you can't eat today because you don't have the money. But it's taken away that stigma for students to have to worry about coming through the line. And so, we often get parents in the past that would say, but how is my student going to know that they can eat? And are other students going to know that they're free? And we don't have any of that any longer. So it's really helped with that overall stigma and stress level for students being in the cafeteria. And I think we're seeing that because we're seeing more and more students eating. Plus, we have really good food.
So I have heard. And so one question I do have also is that because you've had such a dramatic increase in the number of students taking lunch every day, what has that done to like the operations side of getting students through quickly, right?
Yeah, it can be a challenge. So certain sites we've had to add an extra salad bar, milk cooler, cash register, that sort of thing in order to get them through. Last year I do believe Eastridge started off with 8 employees. This year they went to 12. And so, but the great news is the revenue is surpassing the cost of the labor. And we've seen that with our last 2 months of site reports. And so we're able to service them because we can get the food out to them quicker, make sure that the salad bars are stocked. They're not waiting on milk because the milk cooler's empty. We're adding lines wherever possible. But let's face it, I can't stress how excited we are to get the additions of 3 high schools. Can we please open in a month? If you saw the size of some of our walk-in coolers and freezers, you would wonder how we do this on a daily basis. They are shoe boxes. They are tiny. And so they always joke that they play Jenga every day trying to put their trucks away, but they just do such a good job. But yeah, it's been operationally, there have been challenges, but coming out of COVID, I don't think anything can be worse than that. So, we've heard pivot a million times. These guys are pro pivoters. And so they take every challenge, and busy is something that they can handle when they're staffed. When you're not staffed and you're super, super busy, it's just nothing but stress. But they love hearing the numbers and seeing the results and seeing the kids and just know that they're fed and they're nourished so that they can.
That's awesome. Thanks. My last question, I guess, is for maybe Julie. I know that like statistically, whoever they are, have found that like free school lunch leads to better educational outcomes. Is there like a statistically valid way for us to track that in our district, or is it just too hard to tease that out with the data?
Yeah, I think that gathering that data will take a little time, just knowing when we had the free meals. But I think what we see is that kids are fed and they have the opportunities to eat, and we know that that is a good thing. We know that learning is impacted when students come to school hungry. I thought you were going to ask me what my favorite lunch was or something, Sammy. I'm like, this question's for Julie. Okay, what's my favorite lunch?
No, and I mean, like, do we hear anecdotally from staff about like kids are, I don't know, perkier in the afternoon or whatever the term is, or not really?
I don't know that I have any data on that.
That's fine. I was just curious if we've seen anything so far. And I know it'll take a while to get data. I'm not asking for.
There is national data though on test scores, overall behavior, things like that, that's directly tied to nutrition and students eating, but for sure.
Yeah, no, I know that. I was trying to see if we knew like
in this district
what the impact was. But I know that those are also taken like longitudinally over. And we've had 1 year of data.
Right. We know that the cafeterias are wild and crazy, and that's due to the sheer volume of students in there, but it's a fun place to be.
I would think it'd be a little bit difficult too to kind of contribute. Is it because kids are eating more lunches all the time, or because they're not learning from home anymore? That they're actually in school and test scores are improving from that too.
Well, and if we couple food and meals with cell phones being out, I mean, kids may be a little bit more talkative because perhaps it's because they're not looking at their cell phones. And so I think there probably are a combination of factors. But I think at the end of the day, we know that making sure students have food to eat is a great thing.
Absolutely.
And I would just duplicate what's been shared, but we have some of the most incredible individuals in our schools serving meals to our kids every day. They are fun, they are engaged. salad bars, I remember 15 years ago when I used to give tours, and that was always a point of pride, stopping and taking a look at that salad bar. What you saw up on the picture is the way it looks every single day. That bar is filled with healthy snacks and healthy parts of the meal every single day. And so just a real big thank you to our nutrition services staff. They do a great job, and the lines are long, but they get kids through very, very quickly.
Can I ask one more question? With respect to staffing, with the increase in meals, has it required more staffing?
Absolutely. A year ago, we were sitting at about 130 employees. Today, we have about 155 that are out in the kitchens. And it's a constant email from me saying, how are you doing? How's the workload? How's the stress level? And as soon as they say, we need another one, I have a stack of applications on my desk from employees waiting to come on board, and we don't have a place for them. And it's been a very long time that I could say that.
Okay, and then I'm assuming that with the funding from the state and federal combined, that covers to pay for the additional staffing, correct?
It is, yep. Okay. And so this was something that we just did a coaching on at our managers meeting on Tuesday, because of course they're very well versed with their profit and loss statements, and they've been chomping at the bit to see their numbers, because they know with that significant raise, we did a quick mathematical calculation with all of them in August of what was going to happen with their overall site reports in regards to their labor percent. And so they were very nervous, and they know that we run each kitchen like its own little restaurant, and they know that they're responsible for that profit and loss statement. And so we went through an entire exercise around how do we either have to increase revenue or we have to decrease costs. Well, the only way to really decrease costs is to lower the quality of the food, which we absolutely, that's a deal breaker for us, or you cut labor. So we really focused on that revenue enhancement side of things versus looking at the costs. And so trying to get more students, and so doing a lot of these programs has enabled them to increase their revenue enough to allow it to cover those additional expenses. And so things right now are looking, I'm shocked at the invoices I'm signing for food, but it's due to the sheer volume. But I'm also shocked when I see the revenue numbers coming in, because they are extreme. They're really, really strong. And so I want to knock on wood, and because things can change and the scale can get tipped the other way. But right now things are looking really, really strong.
Do you have any idea what percentage of each meal goes to staffing costs?
Yeah, our goal is 31%. So 31% of that meal, and it depends, each individual site. We might have a site like Newport that doesn't have, a ton of kids coming through the door, so they might run a 33, but we also might have a high school running a 24. And so I tell them, do what you can to control it, but we're not gonna worry about that, because some years, certain sites might make a lot more than others. Our goal, we're nonprofit status, but we still have to ensure that we can replace our equipment and pay for raises and uniforms and all the things that are important to everybody, and continue with the quality of food that's being offered to students. And so looking at the budget is something I'm a little bit obsessed over. I do it often to ensure, I know I feel like I'm part of the finance team, but we want to ensure we never want to rely on the general fund to cover our costs. And so I went back and I looked at the numbers, and in 2015, which is when I do believe I started as the director, we had a fund balance of $78,000, and we have almost $4 million. And that is due to the hard work of every one of those employees in that building and their commitment to ensuring that we are going to be a financially stable department.
Appreciate it. I could see you're obsessed with the...
Very much so. I am the daughter of an accountant.
No, I appreciate it. You brought a lot of knowledge here, so thank you. Julie, I think it might be prudent to start some kind of an audit system for perkiness. That's something, you're going to write that down.
I'll work on that data. I'll get back to you on that, Eric.
Samples.
All right. Thank you all
Thank
very
you,
much.
Wendy.
Thanks, Wendy.
Okay, on to 5.0, our information items, and we do have 3 of those this evening. So we'll start with 5.1, financial update, and that will be presented by Kris Blackburn, Director of Business Services.
Oh man, that's a tough act to follow now. I do tell Wendy all the time that we used to have some competition between our departments a little bit too, but we haven't had those in a while, but we might have to start those back up again along with their theme days. So it is very nice to sit next to them because we do occasionally get samples. So this week, I believe, I didn't actually get to try it, but they had cheese and something empanadas, and they looked delicious. So I was like, I could smell them. I was like, what's going on out here? So the perks of being in finance. But yes, I will give a lot of props to Wendy, by the way. It's been a pleasure to work with her on the finance side of things, and I do just appreciate that mindset. So Eric, to yours, as far as that budget mindset, even that they do operate that way, but while always keeping our kids at heart. So, all right, well, tonight's financial update was kind of a hodgepodge, I'll call it. It's a little reflection on preliminary results from this past year, enrollment updates, and kind of where we're at right now for 24-25, and as we look forward, kind of what's coming next. So for 23-24, we are wrapping up the audit, and so I always think that we tell people we have 2 seasons. We have audit and budget, and audit, sometimes they're like, weren't they just there? And I'm like, yeah, they come in July, and then they come back, and then they come back again, and come back again, I feel like. So they have wrapped up their on-site field work, and so we're largely done with the predominance of the audit. Now we're wrapping up the things that go into this nice big book that are non-audited type items as well. And so we want to just provide an update on the preliminary results because it's kind of exciting for us. So revenues, the highlights is that we are within 3.14% of budget right now. And the good news is we're over budget. So about 9.6 million, which I will tell you that often we don't like to come in quite that far over either. Sometimes we like to be a little closer in our numbers. There are about 1,000 revenue lines across all funds, but the predominance of these revenues, why that was higher. 1.1 million over in general education aid, and that is largely, we had ended up with 98 more students than our revised budget number. And so as we frequently talk, I think you'll see on a later slide how much $1 million is, now in current dollars, but that really accounts for that dollar overage. The 4 million over in state special education aid, we made a shift in how we utilize our federal special education aid that actually resulted in more revenue on the state side. And so the state actually charges each district, we tuition bill each other. So like, for example, when we send students to 916, through a state system, they reduce our state aid by the tuition bill piece for them servicing our students. And so by moving that tuition bill piece to the federal side, it generated additional state dollars due to the change in formula a couple years ago. 1.8 million over in interest income. Dan and I tend to reference back to Dan as well. We always try to stay conservative as well. And so again, we'd rather come in over than under. But interest income is kind of hard to predict sometimes. And so we try to really just be watching that and be mindful of it. And again, as we look forward, it'll be kind of challenging. So a lot of times we try to look back at the past couple years and adjust as we know if interest rates are going up or down. But that's always nice to see that we're over. And then 1.3 million is just in other local. So fees and admissions, our MA third-party billing revenue was up again this year, a little more than we anticipated even. And so those are really good things. Highlights on the expenditure side then. So within 0.36 of budget. So unfortunately we were over budget, which I hate to say. I like to come in 0.36 under budget, but about $1.1 million. And with the budget our size with 14,700 lines across all funds that we spent money in, it gets to be a little challenging sometimes on that. So I'm always just very pleased at that. We came in that close. The predominance of why we came in over, when I looked back through it, and you'll notice that those numbers don't add up to 1.1 million, they actually come in higher, but 1.5 million over in contracted substitutes and 1.4 million over in contracted transportation. Those, of course, were offset. We do with that many lines. There's a variety of some that are a little over and some a little under, and so those variants, again, were just offset as we looked across. I tend to be under typically in benefits some because, we have pre-tax benefits, and so we, even just budgeting some things like that often will come in a little under. So kind of helps a little bit, but those two were the biggest drivers of that overage. On the fund balance side, there was an increase of $11.3 million in the net effect of those. I will also say, again, that doesn't quite add up. And as you recall, in June, we approved closing the internal service fund and moving that fund balance from the internal service fund, and it came directly into fund balance. So that accounts for that remainder of that increase. Board policy, as a reminder, unrestricted fund balance, our goal is 16.6%, and that really allows it, it's 2 months of operating expenditures is what that number is. And so it allows us to mitigate any current and future risks and ensures a stable cash flow for us. So again, as we can navigate when there's maybe a little highs or a little lows, like Wendy said, 78,000 a few years back in hers, that makes it a little challenging. And so when we can have that money, it helps us kind of ride out those ebbs and flows a little in our funding. And so the really good news, if you turn to the next slide, a little bit hard to read here, but if you'll notice the 23-24 fiscal year activity column. So it's that kind of right about smack dab in the middle, and our projection right now is about 16.89% fund balance, which, yes, Simi, that is over 16.6, so yay. But again, it's a lot of hard work across the district in just continuing to monitor those numbers and have sites and departments monitoring their budgets as well and keeping an eye on those. So additionally, so there's a breakdown by salaries, benefits, services, supplies, capital, and you'll see the variance column as well. So that 0.36 as to what it was made up of. Salaries came in about $1 million under, benefits $3 million under, and services was about $6 million over. But that's where I'll point out that tuition bill that I just spoke of on that federal special education. We used to have some salaries and benefits that were charged there instead of that tuition bill piece. That tuition bill piece ends up in that 300 services category. So of that $6 million, $3 million was that. And then again, when we look at that contracted subs and then transportation accounts for the remainder. Supplies, typically we come in a little under, and that's often we have the sites where we'll allow for carryover on some of their budgets, and sometimes they don't always spend all of that, and so fairly often we'll come in a little bit under there. And then capital and other were pretty close. Fund balance then, this is just a slide of the past 5 years and kind of as we look to the next. So you'll see that nice high number then in 23-24, and our would anticipate will be at our highest fund balance that we've ever had, which is really exciting. 24-25, I'll just kind of put a preliminary budget. I saw budget got cut off on my slide, so my apologies for that. But we did have that approved budget deficit of $5 million, so we are anticipating projecting a drop in that for that little decline. 24-25 enrollment updates. Again, I just always like to keep the board apprised of where we are at. And as of October 29th, and I actually think we dropped 14 students this past week, but when I put the slides together, we were at 19,164. And at that point, and again, just a reminder, enrollment is always a snapshot in time. That would be put us 446 more than our original budget, which is wonderful. And then I'll caveat, by last year, we were also over quite a lot, and we ended up about 50% of that number. As I looked back, I told Julie, I said, I was kind of nerded out over the weekend, and she's like, kind of shook her head at me a little bit, like, what were you doing with enrollment over the weekend? And, it is really hard. I was hoping kind of that I could have a trend and I could see like, oh, look at the last 6 years, it goes, 50% every year of that approximately October number, and there is no rhyme or reason to it. And some of that was certainly with the pandemic and issues with that. We know that our class sizes now are getting a little lower in kindergarten or projected to be out, and that we're replacing some big classes graduating. So it's still really good news what I've shared with people, but it's cautiously good news. So actual will come in lower than that because again, fall is typically our highest enrollment, but about $1 million is 84 students. And so at that, even about 50% of that, we'd be at about 2.6 million, which really helps, again, knowing that we had that budget deficit. So we'll keep our fingers crossed. District were paid on average daily counts, and final counts, again, won't be calculated till next fall. Enrollment drives the budget as always, and so this is just a slide showing, again, that reminder of where we've been at historical and just how flat our enrollment really has been over the years. We do have that kind of right now, we would be the highest as of this fall, but again, that green is where we ended last year, and then the blue is the kind of where we're at right now, and I would anticipate that number will come down slightly. And again, the reason that's important is that drives so much of our revenue. So as we look to the current year, 24-25, things that we're watching. We know that we approved that budget with the $5 million deficit in last June, and so we're continuing, how do we just kind of assess that, and how do we make sure that that $5 million doesn't balloon over the course of following years? And so we're continuing to watch that enrollment. Really wonderful news with that projected increase, and it will result in additional revenue, but we may also see increased expenditures. So sometimes perhaps could be where we have to add a section or a class at the high school, or other, we may just have additional textbooks or other supplies that are needed as well. So sometimes that enrollment does come with at least some marginal cost. Interest income, again, we know that the Federal Reserve just cut interest rates again, so as we project out for this current year, we had 3.6 million received last year. We have 2.3 budgeted for this year, so I think we'll be okay, but it is always for us to continue to monitor. Expenditures, we're continuing to monitor those and making adjustments wherever we can, trying just to see, are there ways that we can just come up with savings? Are there things as we look and review, are there maybe softwares that maybe are underutilized that perhaps we could look at? Do we need to continue that in the future? Other services and things like that particularly. As a reminder, salaries and benefits make up 78% of the general fund budgeted expenditures, and so as we look at that number, that's set in the spring prior to, and so it's really challenging to adjust that in sort of mid-year. So it really is kind of a forward-looking, is there anything we can do there too as we look to next year? Are there positions perhaps that we don't need to fill? Are there ways we can just be a little more creative in some of that? So on the next slide, the projected fund balance then, so this is kind of the bad news. The good news was high enrollment. We met our fund balance for the current year, and then now we go down. But again, this has a lot of assumptions built in. And so I'll just remind everybody that we have assumptions about a 2.5 revenue increase because we know the state has that minimum of 2 and the maximum of 3 as we look forward now in statute. It does have some, we know there'll be some retirees, but typically we've seen fairly low retirees, but we know there's some savings in cost to that. And so there are some assumptions about that, but we also know that we continue to see increases in certain costs as well. So there's inflation factors built in on salaries and benefits, contractual increases. And so really the point of that is as we look forward is we know there's a bit of a structural imbalance between our revenues as well as our expenditures. And so just that reminder that as administration, we'll continue to monitor that and make adjustments where we can, and certainly want to try to, have that not drop, continue to, but just always a reminder, just a snapshot in time on where we're at today on that. Future dates. So truth and taxation hearing. I believe Dan used to call it the Super Bowl of our world, but is December 12th, so the next December board business meeting, only meeting, I guess. At that time, too, we'll also approve the final levy. Audit presentation is typically done in January of 2025, and we did push that to, sometimes we've tried to meet that December meeting, but with having a late audit, and it just got to be really challenging with only the one meeting in December, and so we thought it just a little more prudent, just kind of shift that to January each time. 25-26 budget planning, we're already, in fact, I should have put probably November, we're already having conversations about that. 20 staffing as well begins in January. And then we'll revise the current year budget in March of 25. We'll bring that back to the board, and then we'll approve the preliminary budget next June. By June 30th, we have to. So with that, any questions?
Kris, I had a question. So I'm very excited about the fund balance. I know you are too. But you mentioned the internal service fund. Do you remember offhand how many, because if I remember correctly, that internal service fund is part of the general fund, but it is sort of committed, right? And so do you remember how much money that was?
I want to say we ended up with like 2.8 million roughly that we moved over, and I can get that specific number for you. We did, of course, there was some severance paid out this year that we did take out of that number, and so I think at the time we projected that to last about somewhere between 2.5 to 3.5 years of severance payments that will come out of that dollar amount.
Okay, that's all I need to know. Thanks.
Okay,
Thank you.
Kris. Okay, on to 5.2, and that is calendar for 2025-26, and that will be presented by Julie Nielsen, Superintendent.
Thank you. And Jen, are you running the clicker? Thank you. I'm just amazed, and I think it's as I get older, but like time is flying, and when you're in a meeting and you're already talking about January, and the next person is talking about March or May. And so this evening I'm bringing forth our 25-26 family calendar. It was our goal to make sure that it was approved by the end of November. We had heard feedback from parents and family that they really like to know about the following year before the new year ends. So to start our overview, just a reminder that we are required to include 165 instructional days for students K-12. Of course, with that, there is a certain amount of instructional hours that by levels, we need to make sure that we have included in the calendar. An instructional day is a day during which all students in a particular grade in school are attending and participating in school activities. Days in which school is canceled entirely are not considered instructional or membership days. And so that time wouldn't count, and so we need to always make sure that we're over so that we can factor that in. And then finally, when we think about our teacher contract, they are required 183 days. So as we look at the first slide, when drafting the calendar, thank you. Sean put these nice slides together, so we just didn't have the calendar to show. Again, we need to meet the requirements in terms of days and hours. The state refers to that as seat time. We know that the calendar has an impact on families. I think what you're going to see from this year to our 25-26 family calendar is there's really not a whole lot of ways that you can change things up in a district calendar and keep it between September and typically early June. We, of course, look at the scheduling of spring break. Dana takes occasional calls about calendars and why can't we have this spring break? And sometimes everybody has their own little self-interest as it relates to our district calendar. Of course, we take into consideration holidays and longer weekends. Families have had given input, whether it be Fridays off or Mondays off. And then, of course, we also plan for our professional development for our staff. So as we look at this year's calendar, and up on the slide, you'll see our first 6 months. Just to walk through it with the board, in the month of September, September looks almost identical to this year in terms of date and time. Let me back up. August is very similar in terms of what is occurring this year. September really mirrors. October is a mirror of what is being proposed for the 25-26. November is very, very similar as well. December, we eliminated one professional development day. Currently this year, December 2nd is a professional development day, and as you look at the month of December, students will be going to school 15 days, so there will be 3 full weeks there. As we get into January, there is, I make sure, one less professional development day there. So over the course of the entire calendar, while we had 4 professional development days, we've reduced 2 of those. And that is one of the dates. January 3rd this year is a professional development day, and you will see that staff come back, but on the 2nd, but we don't have students return until January 5th. Other than that, the month of January looks very much the same. February is a mirror. This year we have February 14th as a professional development day. Next year's proposal would be February 13th. As we look at March, March does include a professional development day, which is March 20th. So there was a shift of a professional development day. And then what you see as March 6th as a teacher work day, that just landed on the other side of spring break. And for this proposal, we're putting it on the front side. April, we eliminated a professional development day. This year in our school calendar, we have April 21st as a professional development day. There is not a professional development day included in the month of April. And then in the month of May, our professional development day lands earlier. We want to take care of that before we get into some of our AP testing and et cetera in the schools. And so with that, we round out the school year at or around on the exact same day. A little bit different day, but the same number dates. So our last day for students on our proposed calendar is June 4th. As we think about, and a question I received is just around our asynchronous learning days for our secondary students, that has remained the same. And so there have been no changes to the expectations around when we're testing pre-ACT, ACT, MCA testing at all. So those remain the same. With that, I would just open up if there are any questions.
Yeah, Julie, you had mentioned before about possible calendar changes with the construction, and this isn't showing that as now. When would families have an idea of if that was to be impacted?
Yeah, we had a discussion and we haven't gone back. We're still looking at some of the planning and phasing for the projects, but our hope would be that we would have a better idea by no later than the end of February. So that second business, or the business meeting in February, if we needed to make adjustments to the calendar, we would bring it back to the board, knowing that The adjustments we make, we're more than likely going to keep our spring break and our winter break at the same time. We would need to be flexible within there. And I think we talked about 4 or 5 days. I'm looking around at the people involved, that it would be an adjustment of 4 or 5 days to get some additional time for construction. I think right now we're hoping that the phasing plans can align with the school calendar.
And those days would be them getting out of school or a little early and then going back a little early, correct?
No, it would be starting later
Yeah.
and going longer. Is that correct, team? Starting later. I'm trying to think about which end. Yeah.
I think it was starting earlier.
Oh, start earlier. That's right.
And
Start
so you would-
before Labor Day and end earlier. Yes, thank you. That is what you said first.
Julie, I just had a random question. So we've got spring break the second week, and then kids come back for 4 days, and then there's a PD day. Is there any particular, like, in March, sorry, yeah, any particular rhyme or reason for that?
It was about getting a professional development day. That is the start of a new trimester. And if I remember correctly, we really wanted to avoid testing season, which fell more into April with our MCAs. And I'm looking around again, anybody else on the calendar committee? I think it had to do with some of our testing and having a professional development day at the start of a trimester. The calendar will come back for final approval at the next business meeting.
Okay, thank you, Julie. On to 5.3, and that's our first reading of proposed policy changes presented by Julie Nielsen, Superintendent.
Thank you. I think Kris was busy with this one. Kris was busy cleaning up some of those procedural language pieces. I am bringing forward this evening for you 10 policies, starting with policy 620, credit for learning. We had an earlier conversation about the new legislative changes about either weighting college in our schools and PSEO grades or not weighting. That was a legislative change that we either had to do it or not do it. And so in the policy, what you see coming forward after Christine Schaefer worked with our high school principals, our students and the staff, we are moving forward beginning with next school year. And now remember, our students will be registering here December into January, that beginning next school year, we would be unweighting college in our schools and PSEO classes. And so in the short term, so as not to pull out the rug from students who had already registered, we opted to go the other direction. And then based on the rigor of those classes and conversations with administrators, staff, and students, we are going to unweight, which puts us very much in line with other school districts. Policy 701, establishment of a school district budget. There are some grammatical changes. Additional grammatical changes with policy 701.1, modification of the school district budget. 701.2, the fund balance. We removed the procedural language and the policy was renumbered to 714. 702, accounting, grammatical changes and update to monthly reports. 703, our annual audit, just some grammatical changes. 705, investments, some grammatical changes. 706, we removed some procedural language, are recommending removal of some of the procedural language. 721.2, competitive foods, deleting that policy as there is no MSBA policy in place, and certainly not one that is required as we continue to make sure that our policies are strong and align with MSBA. Policy 730 is our post-issuance debt compliance. The policy was rewritten, and that was as per recommended by Ellers, our financial institute. And so with that, I would take any questions, and I'm sure Kris would be open to any around the finance policies.
Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Julie. Oh, I have to ask her, is there anybody signed up? Okay, nobody signed up. Okay, 6.0, reports and comments, and we'll start with Superintendent Julie Nielsen.
Thank you. First off, some of us enjoyed a really fun volleyball game, and I love volleyball. I just forgot that even at the state tournament, it wasn't quite as rowdy, not perky, but rowdy as other sports. It was very quiet. We kind of sat in our seats. We cheered when our girls had a good hit, but it wasn't like our students were not going back and forth with the other team. I don't know if it was just the venue or just the sport, but our Eastridge volleyball team did lose today, but they won yesterday. just an incredibly strong team and so much fun to watch them play. And a lot of young players. It's just amazing to watch some of these freshmen just hit the ball right down. So it was a lot of fun. We also just want to quickly acknowledge our swim and dive team from East Ridge, who will also be competing in the state tournament next week. And with that, plays are still going on. Still the opportunity, and I said I would say it tonight, You're in Town is the name of the play. Woodbury High School, super funny, super funny. So I do recommend it. This will be their last weekend. And then East Ridge High School has their play starting. I somehow go on opening nights. Has Alice at Heart. And that will start this weekend and run another weekend through the 16th, I believe. And then finally, and last, we will be honoring and recognizing our veterans on Monday at our high schools and a number of our elementary schools.
Okay, any board members have any events coming up with their committees? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to 7.0, and that is our future meeting dates. November 21st, 2024, school board business meeting here at the District Service Center at 6 p.m. December 12th, 2024, school board business meeting. That is the only meeting in December, and that is here at the District Service Center at 6 p.m. And with that, 8.0, we are adjourned.